Today we have a guest. I'm excited. I just might wet my pants. Uh-oh.
Welcome to the Nate the Bullet Podcast, show number 8, February 3rd, Friday, 2017. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, and the email, info@natethebullet.com. Nate the Bullet is me, Wayne Roberts, someone that doesn't know shit but tries real hard, he thinks, and needs to stop talking about himself in the 12th person. I'm not able to take anti-douche pills. They give me cramps and diarrhea, so hopefully today's show will help take the place of the pills, and my guest will prescribe something better. The show is unofficially sponsored by the Zendo Project, pulled from the Mr. Mushy stocking for nonprofit plugs by our guest today. The Zendo Project provides a supportive environment and education to help transform difficult psychedelic and psychological experiences into opportunities for learning and growth. ZendoProject.org. Since 2012, they've been a presence at events like Burning Man, Echo Stage, and Envision, providing a chill-out tent for those overwhelmed and needing a safe place with trained help. Not into these events but want to be there to help, Zendo provides training on the roles and principles of harm reduction protocol. Excellent, necessary organization. The ZendoProject.org. And say you heard about them on the Nate the Bullet podcast, and they'll be sure to say that's great. What's a Nate the Bullet? This half hour is also usually brought to you by The Continued Adventures of Dishes and Cannabis Storytime with Kitty Cat, a little book I normally read from every even-numbered show. Unfortunately, I forgot it when visiting the Kingdom of Uruk and waiting for it to be shipped back. I spaced that I had lent it to my bodyguard Seth, but my head needed serious defragmenting because animals joined the voices in my head, and people thought I was maybe on steroids from being more buff than I'd ever been. I think it was 1982. Dr. Cole Marta from Interventional Psychiatry Associates and collaborator with MAPS, the Zendo Project, and others. Great to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is, I'm nervous, but I shouldn't be in this place. This should be one of the most comfortable places to do this. So
yeah, take a deep breath. Should be fine.
And the tea?
Yeah, sip some tea, relax, enjoy the scenery.
Now, is this, you have to be honest with me, I have to ask, is this really like the book, I Am the Cheese, and this is really a session of mine, not an interview like I'm perceiving it at the moment?
I think this was all an elaborate trick to get you to start a podcast and then somehow float out the ideas and the name. Yes.
Have you ever know the book,
No,
I Am the Cheese?
No.
Actually, the movie, Robert McNaughton, who played the big brother in E.T., was in it.
Okay.
It was small, but I read the book first, but it was basically this kid telling this older gentleman all these stories about his life. Or he goes there, he goes here, he goes there, and it turns out he's always in a session. And where he's biking around all the time is a military, what do you call it?
A psychiatric hospital?
This big campus
cool.
around.
Yeah.
So I always worry. That book has been in my head ever since I read it. It bit me, and I'm really surprised when I talk to people that have never heard of it.
Yeah.
Any therapist I've ever talked to, even the ones I've actually had, not ones I'm just interviewing.
Yeah.
I find it especially being geared to more the teens is where it was. I read it, and I think it was in 8th grade.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and always something that I would think about when I would deal with people with psychosis and stuff. It was always, I had that similar fear, especially when I was just starting and training. Like, what if I just think I'm a student here? Like, these people are so, they're totally convinced of what's going on for them that, it seems it would be just as surprising to them to learn that, the way that whatever maybe delusion that has developed, in fact, isn't the way things are going on. They'd be just as surprised. So it always kind of mess with my head too.
Well, one of the things that helped mine as well was when I read that book, my parents, we owned property right next to a place called Pineland, which was a mental institution in Maine. There's still little pieces of it, but the campus now, this gigantic campus, is now, they have weddings and all kinds of other stuff. But Pineland was where Stephen King's mom worked. And it's sort of the basis for a lot of the mental institutions in his book. That's, it's where he got some of the stuff. And I mean, literally our land here and Pineland starts here. And that house...
All the more reason to be worried.
Maybe
The fence was just a little skewed, and actually you guys lived on campus.
Are they lying to me? And I'm merely just one of the patients that doesn't have to be there. You can be in one of the houses. Is that what's really going on? But and we since 87 I think it is, we've rented that house to Pineland. Oh, wow. And it still has mental. So
they do use it still for that purpose there, the whole campus.
Not the campus, but our house, which is about a mile, 3/4 of a mile from the big campus. And then there's other houses that are a little bit closer, and those still have some. Okay. But there was one right in front of the campus. There was this big white house that was very, it wouldn't be like the Psycho house, but similar in that old style. Mm. And they had some in there, and there was one that was always sitting on the front lawn, Indian style, and just he'd wave to you when you'd stop right there at the stop sign. He'd wave and then jerk off, the jerk off motion, and then smile with this big old grin on his face. He wouldn't whip it out or anything.
Passive aggressive.
It was pretty wild. He was a happy dude. He would just sit right there, and he looked like he was probably in his early mid-20s or something, maybe early 30s. But he'd been there forever, and that was his spot right in the middle of the lawn. You stop at the stop sign, and
if that was everybody who passed by.
For pretty much, if you stopped and if you stared at him, if you just sat there, it wouldn't be anything. But if you looked over and he noticed, he'd start. He'd wave, and then all of a sudden it was the only thing that was missing. It seemed like was not throwing his feces.
That's good. That would be a pretty gnarly legacy to leave behind.
But it was fun to take people and stop at that stop sign if they'd never been there before. And like, hey, you've never been here? You've never seen this? Yeah. Oh, really? Hold on a sec. Look over there. Hey, see that dude? Right. Oh my God! Yeah. But I just laugh. It was not dangerous. He was just
sure.
And it was better than when you go into the campus and play basketball, where some of my friends and I would do, and you'd see some of them with helmets, of course, and big brick buildings, and just sitting there and just think, think. Like, what? And all these workers, you just let them do that?
Right.
Well, we put a helmet on, but you're going to have, within 10 minutes, aren't they going to have a concussion? Even if they have the helmet?
Right.
Anyway, blah, blah, blah. How about you? What got you into this area with psychiatry, with working with psychedelics and ketamine?
Well, I kind of grew up in a household that had had a different sort of outlook on psychedelics in particular. Like somebody in the family was a historian and knew about Terence McKenna in like the early 90s and stuff. So I kind of grew up listening to Terence McKenna tapes, literally like on the way to school. Like, so I got a pretty early exposure to the fact that there exists, cultures that use psychedelics and plant medicines in a sacred way, other than, outside of the world of abuse and stuff. That is what most people, I think, are exposed to when, even with psychedelics, a lot of people, like, that's sort of, they think of it as something you do when you go to a party, or like, crazy kids come to school on acid or something like that. It's like, that's not like the way that they had been, the like concept of them had been, revealed to me, as far as just when I, the first times I was hearing about a lot of these compounds, it was like, in the context of how Native Americans, used peyote, and, I got like Carlos Castaneda books for Christmas from other more distant relatives and stuff like that. So it was just a very different idea of ways that people interact with these things. So then I went to college. I I wrote a paper about rave culture and the substances that are used in raves and stuff, and that's when I first kind of looked up MAPS in particular, that the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, that organization, got some information. They weren't at that time doing any of their own like full studies. And interestingly, I didn't know that I went to UC Santa Cruz and they were based in Santa Cruz, but the founder, Rick Doblin, I think at the first time that I was introduced to the idea was like I knew MAPS existed before I worked on that project. That's how I knew to kind of look to them for possibly information for this paper I wrote. And that at that time, I think he was living in Florida. So I was told like there's this organization in Florida that's trying to do, research with psychedelics, or at least there's this guy in Florida who is. So I didn't know like this whole time I was in undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, like I later found out the headquarters, like I went by it every single day on the bus on the way to school. It was like I could picture it now, like exactly where it is on my route. So that was pretty bizarre considering, that it's a big part of my life now, different projects that I do in collaboration with them. Like I'm not an official employee or anything like that, or one of the founders of the Zendo, but I volunteered a handful of times with the Zendo, and I've been working with them for quite a while now.
How long?
I think the first thing I worked on with them was in 2013. So it's been a few years. It was early on in their sort of development. It was the second year that they did Burning Man. So I volunteered at the Zendo for the first time there, and then I've done probably half dozen festivals at least since then with them, and now I kind of am more in a supervisory kind of role there.
Nice.
When I go, which is like just because I have more experience with even how like when we run out of water, like how do we deal with those kinds of things, stuff like that.
Are you part of the training for the trained people that volunteer that want to be part? I
have been part of the training, particularly there's a couple of training videos on YouTube, and I'm in a couple of those just talking more about like, because of my background in medicine, sort of what are some of the more medical things that volunteers need to be aware of. The biggest thing being like dehydration at a festival. Typically people are kind of negligent about their water intake, or also drinking a lot of alcohol, which dehydrates you and stuff like that. So just like some basic stuff to look out for. Like we don't provide medical care there, but we're usually in close close proximity. It varies from festival to festival, but we try to be, as much as we can, kind of have relationships with the medical, and so that it's my role in training would be more like, what are the more common things we need to be keeping an eye out for, common sense stuff to kick them to medical if we think there is a medical issue going on.
I've never been to Burning Man, and I've only been to one rave, and that was years ago when I was a drinker.
Yeah.
And I think there was like 2,500 people there. I think that was somewhere around there. And I was maybe one of 5 people that were drinking instead of rolling.
Uh-huh.
And it took me a long time to realize what an idiot I was.
Probably just a big loud party if you're drinking. Like, I would think the alcohol would make you want to be more social, and the sound's just like overwhelming, and
it was kind of like it felt more alone. It was the most lonely drinking. It was very lonely drinking because nobody else. It was almost like they could tell I was on alcohol because nobody else was, and so they were. It was like they were. There was like like had a force field around me, and I smelled or something.
Right.
But
so that's kind of the way I actually, I guess, to answer the original question, the way I kind of got involved was just being aware and being willing to volunteer, like staying in touch. If I went to like a place where people from MAPS were presenting, introducing myself. I felt like once I was at the point where it was clear I was going to finish my medical degree and move into psychiatry, I thought, how could I be useful to, an organization like this that has really solid science behind it, I read the studies as they come out. I stay on top of the science, and they're really, really exquisitely designed studies. So it's also kind of like fun to know all of that. It's a topic that comes up often enough, and to sort of be armed with all of the actual data, it's nice to be able to like pull all that out, because they're designed with sort of criticism and expecting that it's a controversial subject, and so they really cover all of their bases. So it's really interesting to get into a discussion with somebody who maybe has some preconceptions about it, because most of their concerns that they bring up, like bam, like I could give you the exact number of people who went on to have XYZ issue that they maybe are concerned about. A lot of times people have the misconception that with the MDMA studies, for example, that that they're giving people bottles of MDMA to take home, and like, well, of course they're feeling better, they're high on ecstasy all the time. It's like, no. The people who are in these studies often do not look back on the experience fondly as like being an ecstatic, happy experience. It's like the MDMA helps to be able to tolerate some pretty terrible, some pretty difficult work to have to push through. So we're not just sort of, the idea isn't just like getting people high on ecstasy and, well, no, they feel better.
So right now you're speaking of the MDMA studies that MAPS are doing for PTSD.
Yeah. So my first experience in medical school with psychiatry was actually a rotation that I did at the North Chicago VA, and the entire rotation was going to PTSD groups. So that left like a really big impression on me. And when I saw that was becoming a primary focus of MAPS's research, it just made too much sense to me. So that's kind of the way I got involved, was in, like I said, bringing my skill set and offering it, anywhere where that could be of use or value to what they were doing. And it's been all like volunteer, but that they run a lot on, they need volunteers a lot.
I signed up. I'm on the list for MAPS and
cool.
all the subs. Yeah,
Zendo's all almost entirely volunteer, run. So they rely on people volunteering, and if you're willing to volunteer, usually they'll find something for you.
Right. Now, with the PTSD studies, what is exactly that happens if somebody comes in and they're going to do that? How much is it that they get? How does that work?
Yeah, there's the first studies, I believe, were 125 milligrams to, they could potentially take a supplemental dose of half of that, so a total of 187.5 would be the maximum they would get in a session. So the way that they've sort of refined it now, they actually did have a couple of studies where they used 75 milligrams, and they had one where some people got 75, some people got 100. So it seems like, I don't think that the data hasn't been published yet as far as which dose is more beneficial, but I know that they've had good outcomes with all three dosings, 75, 100, and 125 milligrams. But so the way that the actual process goes, if you are in the study, is they'll have an initial evaluation, and if you're appropriate for the study, then there'll be 3 sort of introductory sessions there's no medicine, They're normal like psychotherapy sessions, primarily oriented around preparing for a medicine session. And then there'll be medicine. That'll be an all-day event. And then a follow-up the next morning. And then 3 integration sessions for that one medicine session. And then another medicine session for a total of 3. So in between each medicine session, there's 3 integration sessions. And after the last one, there's 3 sort of termination or follow-up sessions.
And how far between the 3?
So if everything's going well and scheduled right, they're typically, the integrations are like a week apart. So there'll be 3 weeks of integration and then another medicine session. So about once a month, somebody would receive an actual MDMA session.
Oh.
So a lot of it is the therapy that's going on. The medicine.
Before, yeah.
It seems like the medicine's role really is, and this makes sense based on some of the fMRI studies that show the effects of MDMA on the brain. But it seems like the role of the medicine is to allow the person to tolerate, an emotional experience. Some people call it like a heart-opening experience. But it allows people to tolerate the emotions that typically would get in the way of the therapy that needs to happen. And so it's not that the MDMA itself is necessarily which is why I think it's important that people know the real science, because this game of telephone can happen where I see these shocking headlines that are meant to kind of grab people's attention. It's ecstasy cures everything, stuff like that ends up being what it becomes, and that's obviously very dangerous. I wouldn't advocate for anybody to try to get ecstasy and take it and think that that's going to fix their PTSD.
Oh, no. But there are, for people that do that stuff, not that it's condoned or whatever, there's stuff, what is that, dance safe or something? Where you can get, what is it?
Dance safe.
And they have kits or something you can get just to make sure if you're going to go and do that we're not condoning, but people are going to do it. But
yeah, Dance Safe is a great organization. Actually, when I was in college, that was an organization that I did find myself being able to access, because again, I didn't realize that MAPS was a hop, skip, and a jump from where I was every day. But Dance Safe had, I think Berkeley had a Dance Safe chapter, and I was trying to see if we could get one at UC Santa Cruz, and so I've been aware of Dance Safe for a long time. They're really great, and they're I think an important service. They're definitely an important service, and they've been also at a few festivals, a lot of times right beside the Zendo, and it's a good combination because Dance Safe, the people who work at that booth are incredibly knowledgeable about even the most obscure things that are out there now that people might be getting their hands on, and they're aware of how little data there is or how much data there is as far as safety concerns with it. And on their website, they make available these kits, where you can test for to a pretty good level of certainty what exactly people have, whatever molecule you're testing, you can identify with pretty good accuracy.
Nice. Now, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, and interestingly, there was a group that did a YouTube documentary called "What's in My Baggie," and they went around and they took a kit like that, and they went, I don't know what festivals they went to, but they were just stopping people in the parking lot and testing what was in their baggie, and they didn't reveal like the percentages, but they just showed clip after clip after clip of it being basically bath salts. Like,
Garbage.
even people who are like, oh, I got this from my best bro, like, and he's been getting the best stuff forever, and like, this is definitely the real thing. Like, no matter how certain people were, like, no, it was not MDMA a lot of the time.
And back to the PTSD thing now. So you're saying that what it really is it's just a kind of like a MDMA for PTSD. It's more like a doorstop to hold the door open, so you can continue going, and it's not as, and see that it's not really raining outside. There's not really that much of a storm.
Right.
I mean, what the hell? I pulled that out of my ass. I just popped into my head.
Well, the one of the symptoms of PTSD is this emotional isolation, and that's related to the fact that, part of what changes in the brain of people who go through an intense trauma is, as the brain adapts to try to prevent this, a life-threatening situation of that kind again, it heightens the negative emotional centers of our brain called the amygdala. It heightens the activity of those so that people are always on guard, always kind of fearful, because that when you're experiencing those kinds of emotions, you're, checking and scanning, you're more vigilant about your environment.
Right.
And also it decreases the activity of the prefrontal cortex, which is the part that's like, sits and works through a problem and makes sense of things and controls impulse and stuff like that. So people with PTSD, their brain actually kind of rewires where they're always sort of on edge, easily triggered over into a state of negative emotion, and at the same time, like less likely to stop and think things through. So you can imagine if you're in combat, for example, that's important. Like, you're always on guard, you don't sleep very well. When you do, your brain's reminding you of terrible things by giving you nightmares, so that when the time comes, you react quickly to any threat. It's a survival. I think PTSD is really unique in that it's, I think, something that any normal, healthy brain would adapt to have under unhealthy conditions. It's like a healthy adaptation.
Right.
But when people come home, or after, maybe somebody who survived an assault, like in civilian PTSD, it's like, can you really live a happy and fulfilled life always preparing for, the person that you see on the street in the event that they were going to attack you? Like, the rest of your life, it may never happen again. But the brain is always built for survival.
Yeah. My dad, I believe, he's not been diagnosed that I'm aware of. I haven't spoken to him in a couple of years, but I feel like that's what I grew up around. It's almost like wondering, not that I cared for Al-Anon, that I wanted to go there, even though I grew up with alcoholics. But I always wondered, what about for PTSD? Is there an Al-Anon for PTSD? People that grew up around PTSD?
There are groups, definitely, and I think bigger cities are going to have more options. But one really great organization called NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, they have a lot of information. They have a website, NAMI.org, NAMI.org, and they have a lot of information about different conditions, a lot of information about different treatments. That is, the entire organization, it's a national organization, is entirely run and informed by patients and patient advocates. Sometimes they'll invite like a specialist in a particular area to like speak at one of their meetings or something like that. But their website and their information is completely free of drug company and even doctors like input. So it's a really reliable place for people to go. I think the internet will provide you with whatever explanation you want for things.
Pretty much.
So I always think, I always refer people to NAMI if they want to look up like a medication that they're taking or a diagnosis that, has been suggested or something like that. So they don't, fall into some, strange blog about a single person's bad experience with who knows what, and so that organization, they'll have, depending on the city and how outgoing, I guess, that group of people maybe, they'll have meetings and things, sometimes for family members, sometimes for people with a particular condition. So I know in Los Angeles there are support groups and things like that for people who have a loved one who is suffering from severe mental illness.
NAMI.org?
Yeah.
NAMI.org. What was the next thing I was going to say? I told you the right. So how, we talked about, you mentioned Terence McKenna, and I was introduced, I knew who Terence McKenna was many years ago, but I didn't really dig deep into it until 2005, I think it was, when I was introduced more to the Amanita muscaria mushroom. So it's nice to be talking to a psychiatrist that doesn't think you're crazy when you say you think Jesus was a mushroom.
Oh, yeah, right. I definitely heard that. I mean, I don't know the details of it, and I'd love to hear more about it. It's certainly a very interesting idea. And people who, cultures that use psilocybin mushrooms, and even some of the studies that have used psilocybin mushrooms, certainly talk about it in mystical terms. And in fact, some of the studies that have been done with psilocybin for smoking cessation, for example, they actually measure the degree of mystical experience that people have during their psilocybin experience. And something really amazing about the smoking cessation study was that they showed that it wasn't the dose of the psilocybin that predicted people's response as far as their ability to quit smoking. It was the degree of mystical experience that they achieved. So that was really cool to see. That's kind of a question I've always had was, can there be lasting improvement, lasting healing from a single experience, like an experiential type of healing? And that study, so to me, that study was like really amazing to see that they linked those two things. So I don't know, I'm not as familiar with Amanita muscaria. I know what it is. It's the like classic,
the red and white
cartoon red top with white dots.
The Smurf shroom, the Alice in Wonderland shroom. Yeah, Christmas.
Yeah.
Our Christmas traditions are all based in that mushroom. And the Bible, eat of my, the manna, eat of, my body, my flesh. I mean, mushrooms are fleshy. They keep the trees alive. They are the below and above because spores can live in space. And they keep all the trees alive. The mycelium, the biggest organism on the planet is mushroom in Oregon.
Right.
And then you go with, you look at, Google Vatican fountains, Pope clothing, and pine cone statue at the Vatican.
Wow.
And like, wait a minute, why are these big mushroom fountains and why that pineal gland statue? Because how do you clean off the pineal gland to see God? You use the mushroom.
Very interesting.
And the Pope clothing, to me, it's banker pedophiles stole the mushroom cult, a mushroom cult. That's what happened.
Okay.
Banker pedophiles went, we're taking this and gonna
run with it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
As Bill Hicks would say, end of fucking story.
Mushrooms are certainly incredible. I mean, beyond their psychedelic properties. I'm always, I guess, a closet mycophile. I've never grown or hunted or been interested. I don't even really enjoy eating mushrooms, the edible mushrooms or anything like that. But, listening to a lecture from like Paul Stamets or any of these people who, it's always mind blowing, what the diversity and the, resiliency, like you said, spores can survive in space, which, you've heard about panspermia.
No seed, so there you go. You have your virgin birth.
No seed, virgin birth. That's interesting.
Jesus was born in a manger, in a pile of turd.
That's really interesting. Are you familiar with panspermia?
No, but that's quite a word.
Theory that mushroom, that life on Earth may have been colonized by like a meteor that was carrying spores, because mushrooms are
That's what
so
Prometheus means to me, the movie
like,
Prometheus. That's really what it is. Make it look scarier, but it's just a fungus.
Yeah. Well, we do know,
and we've turned into a virus. They
can live pretty much in every environment that we know about. And if the spores can truly live in space, it occurred to me that whether or not that's what happened to our planet, the fact that there's been meteors that have hit our planet and probably knocked some rocks loose, it's like, seems impossible to deny that whether it's how life on our planet evolved, we are seeding, if the spores can survive the heat of the impact and some of our debris to leave our orbit, then it's like we're sending our spores out. Maybe it's not what happened to our planet. Maybe mushrooms initially evolved, but if those spores can survive deep space, and potentially eventually that rock that shot off of our Earth hits somewhere else, where mushrooms could potentially survive, then panspermia would then be valid through that event.
What a word.
It's like whether
spermia.
It's like such a cool idea, like it creates some really amazing like mental images. Yeah. Imagining like these asteroids slamming into Earth and shooting mushroom spores out into space. Yeah. Pretty cool. Mushrooms are really an interesting life form. As my original background's biology, so I dork out on that stuff.
And you see them also in so much, all the religious, texts and all the artwork. And then when you talk about the Hindus, I mean, they think cows are holy and their gods are always blue and hermaphroditic. Why do they like cows? Because God comes out of its ass.
Interesting.
And the blue honey, I guess you call it blue honey over there. You pinch the stem and they turn blue.
Yeah. The psilocybin-containing mushrooms bruise blue. Yeah. So was this all in a single book?
There's all kinds of books, but I mean, But when it comes to the first time I understood the first spark about the Hindu thing was hearing Bill Hicks say it. And the whole holy shit, where do you think the term holy shit, that good shit came from? Or
that's interesting.
The whole stoned ape, Terence McKenna theory, but it's all just depending on the region. To me.
Yeah, and the Amanita, it seems, if I recall, it's more like Northern Europe,
Siberia,
like Caucasus Mountains, Siberia, Russia, which has its own whole like shamanistic traditions, and that I think I'm less familiar with those for sure. Those I don't hear much about the Russian sort of lineage of shamanism and stuff like that, but I know that Amanita muscaria was a part of that lineage somewhere.
It's I'm trying to think. There's two main tribes, but I can't think, their names are escaping me, but they use caribou as their animal, and which we call reindeer. Right. And the favorite snack of the caribou over there is
those mushrooms.
Now we know why they can fly.
Yeah, that was really funny at the Shane Moss show he was I'd never heard of that.
Oh, the piss thing?
The phenomenon of people drinking reindeer urine after they
I haven't
eat
drank reindeer urine, but I've
Amanita
drank did my own to test to see if that works.
Really?
It does.
What does it do?
You basically get another peak that's not quite as strong. I mean, depending on how much you consume. But I read up on the whole urine therapy, and that's in the Bible as well. You know, the fountains with the men peeing and the boys peeing. That whole cycle of like drink of thine own cystine.
Wow.
You know, and you know urine therapy. You know, use it for
very interesting.
Acne, all kinds of things.
Well, I mean, this as far as the religious or sacred use of mushrooms, I'm much more familiar with the psilocybin lineage. You know, it seems like information that's more accessible, and of course, there's a psilocybin use at a lot of the festivals and stuff like that, and they're doing the research with the psilocybin. But Amanita muscaria works in a completely different way. It doesn't have psilocybin and psilocin and stuff like that. It has like totally different compounds. So I'd imagine it produces a completely different experience. It doesn't give you a psilocybin experience. It gives some other experience. So I'm curious, what have you heard, or what was the experience with Amanita?
From what I've read, it's more of a drunkard. It's more of a drunkard sort of thing. There's still mystical parts of it, but it's different than our normal cubensis that that people consume.
Sure.
Who we is, I don't know. There's a little more uncomfortableness, I think, from what I've read. There's more. I think you'll have more of the nausea. I think also that you have to eat more than cubensis.
Really.
But the main thing, though, when it comes to that, for me, I know you're going with the compounds, but I just see it how that's the chalice.
Yeah.
It's the golden chalice, because also it's not psilocybin, but when those grow out, if you let them grow, then they turn into a round table, Knights of the Round Table, and then it curls up into a chalice and forms a golden ring.
Wow.
And some of them are gold. The whole gold, goose that laid the golden egg. And the Easter egg hunt is all, to me, from my studies, is the Amanita muscaria as well. It was easier to have little kids go under those big pine trees where the pineal gland, anyway. But if it curls up and turns into a chalice and water, collects there after a bit, it's going to have those compounds and drink it, and there's your real holy water. Or it would be back to where, if there wasn't enough to go around for the village, you drank the shaman's piss or somebody else's that had a bunch, and boom.
Wow.
So when I read that, I was like, to a buddy of mine, I got to test this. So the next time we shroom, I'm going to try this. So I didn't, I didn't drink
You're
coffee.
gung ho, man.
It was weird, but so much reading on urine therapy, I'm like, wait a minute, this is nothing. It's not a big deal. But it is to most people.
It's sterile, but it doesn't sound pleasant.
It just tastes like warm, flat soda.
Okay.
And you don't do it immediately anyway. You put it aside. Well, this is how I did it. We did it. He did his own, I did mine, but I drank nothing but water for 2 days or so before, so I didn't want. I wanted to be as clear as possible.
Fleshed out what you could.
I didn't, and I didn't eat that much, because when I know I'm going to do them, I like to have the empty stomach, so there's no and there's no chance of throwing up or anything.
Did you? So you ate them?
So what we did was, we ate them.
Because I've seen a video. Did you know Hamilton Morris? I think is it Hamilton Morris. He does a series for Vice called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, or he used to, and I'm not sure if he does it anymore. But I saw something where he went to Iceland and got a hold of some of these things, and he smoked them though.
Really, I didn't see that.
And I think he was talking about, like, if I recall, his experience was like of things seeming to change size or something like that. Like, so there was some real visual stuff happening, which made me think of Alice in Wonderland, where, like, in the even in the Disney cartoon, they have the very classic Amanita muscaria mushroom that she
That's right.
takes a bite and she changes sizes. I was like,
perception.
I was wondering if that's like a big part of that.
It's perception.
Experience with Amanita muscaria.
Yeah, I think we'll all psychic.
The size perception. And
perception of anything. Like everything above, below. She was small and she was big, and it's to me that whole all those movies. Well, one thing I got to ask you, I got to remember to ask you about E.T. What you think? But like A Christmas Carol is a psychedelic story. If you read, Christmas is that not when you go and you read testimonials of people who have done Ibogaine and ayahuasca or some other stuff, but usually it's those two. You read testimonials, you're like, wait a minute, that sounds like a Christmas Carol. Goes to Christmas past and that whole thing with or Game of Thrones right now. You watch Game of Thrones?
I stopped watching Game of Thrones a little while ago.
Right now, one of the characters is with a tree that talks, Max von Sydow, and the tree talks to him, and it's the whole, and the tree takes him back to places that he was never at, like this past, Ghost of Christmas Past sort of thing. Yeah. The tree of knowledge, and it's so, that's what A Christmas Carol is to me. That's a fucking psychedelic story that's disguised as it's a Christmas story, and there's a reason for it. Yeah,
I've definitely heard a lot of people's descriptions of their Ibogaine experiences and it being like really autobiographical, like that more so than more so than any other. Some people have told me more so than any other thing that they had experienced. It was like very much about their ways, like their. So I could definitely see that.
Which is why it helps you kill it. That's why it helps you get rid of other addictions too, not just opiates. Ibogaine, even though it's very dangerous.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Exciting literature. There's obviously like some. It's unfortunately not very well studied yet, but there's a lot of that going on, and a lot of anecdotal reports of people having like life-changing experiences as a result of that.
Life-changing, and a lot of opiate addicts being able to get rid of that,
Right.
It's not, another thing, that's where when I used to talk about it, when I learned about it in 2005, and I would tell people all the time, because I knew that people knew somebody somewhere was an opiate addict, and they would be talking about it. So
it's like epidemic now.
But thanks to us.
Hopefully the funding will start coming into like research.
Unfortunately the funding goes to the military that watches over all that stuff in Afghanistan, so the CIA brings it back for us nice and cheap. But that's another story. But that's the thing. It's so gross. It's just a stupid cycle because we're the ones bringing it in anyway and blame other places. But every time the United States has had a hold of Afghanistan, heroin's gone shot up every time. Especially now for the last 15 years or so, and it's cheap too now. So the pharmaceutical industry's kind of, wait a minute, they're not buying these. They're going to. I know some people that usually with the normal pharmaceutical stuff that they're addicted to, going back to smack because it's cheaper.
Right. I mean that seems to be like, and it makes so much sense to me. For it, and that seems to be the recurring story you hear over and over and over is, it's one of those drugs where you really have to amplify the dose and frequency in order to maintain the effects. And not only that, when you don't have it, you get sick. It's like being in a position where you have the worst flu of your life and imagine, you can make it go away immediately. I don't blame people when they get, hooked on these things. Those are deep hooks. And then eventually, the cost of them, from what I understand, that's exactly the way that it progresses to heroin, is that heroin in the end just makes financial sense. Nobody wants to go, become a heroin addict, but once they're sort of maxed out what they can do with their pharmaceutical pills, then financially they end up just making a decision to go to heroin, and here we are.
Yeah.
An epidemic on our hands.
Very much so, and that's part of the reason why I do the podcast, is hopefully to get rid of, to help some of that stuff. I know a lot of people are out there doing it, but getting back to gotta go back to piss. So what we did was I read up that what we do is eat them. I always do them at night. I never do them during the day. People that tell me they do mushrooms during the day, I'm like, what are you doing? But we were also doing a heroic dose. We were doing going over 5 grams.
Of Amanita?
No, just regular cubensis.
Oh, okay.
But,
that's what you drink.
drank the piss after the cubensis, and so did he.
Okay.
So we always do it our little ceremony, a glass of wine, and separate, one for you, one for me, one for, this whole thing. And then we eat it. And what you want to do is catch the first couple of peas after you've consumed them, I guess.
Okay.
And the first time I went to do it, I totally spaced. I forgot because I was so wow, and having I felt like I was in the chocolate factory, and I totally forgot when I went to the restroom because I was looking around and just this is so no, I forgot to catch it. Next time came around, I remembered, had everything ready, and then it's about you get your peak. And when the peak is starting to, fall down, you're coming down, and especially if you're with a buddy doing it, because you've got this bond and this connection. That's the other part that I love about it. Then it was time. When the peak started to come down, then it was, you know what? I want to bounce my peak back up. I went in, and it wasn't as long, didn't last as long, but you were back right up there again for a good another half hour, 45 minutes. It was gorgeous.
That's really interesting.
It was hard.
I'd never heard of it.
It was difficult.
I'd never heard of it with any kind of mushrooms before. And then, just earlier this week, saw Shane Moss's stand-up, and he talked about it with Amanita, and then now you're saying with psilocybin, and I'm like, where's this world of mushroom pea drinkers? How do I hear 2 stories of people drinking mushroom pea in 1 week when I went an entire lifetime with 0 stories of people drinking mushroom pea?
That's awesome. I noticed you still have your the stamp on your hand.
Yes, I do.
Because we didn't know we were both at the
Shane Moss show. He's really hilarious.
Yeah, a good trip tour. He was here 2 nights ago here in Los Angeles. He's going to be back March 28th, I think, in LA.
March 28th at Largo. Free plug for Shane.
Fuck yeah. I plugged him before. Because when I came across him, the whole thing with my foot, I felt like I was like, wait a minute, this guy comes from a small town. He reminds me of a relative of mine. He talks about he used to drink a lot, and then he's become a psychonaut, and then he starts telling the story about his feet, and I told you my horror story. So I'm like, man, I'm relating to this guy more and more. And then Rogan, I was watching him on the Rogan podcast because somebody had brought him up because I talk about psychedelics, and somebody said, you ever heard of Shane Moss? He's doing a psychedelic trip tour. This is like back in October of last year, and I'm like, no. So I went looking, and I went, oh, dude, he's on the Rogan podcast. Yeah, I'll fucking check that out. It was a great episode. But he's talking about the horror story with his feet from breaking both his heels, and then Joe's like, well, what insurance do you have? And I'm like, no. He's actually pulling out his wallet. I bet he's gonna say my insurance. He's gonna say my insurance.
Right.
And he did. And I went, oh my Christ, they really suck. Not that they do. They hung up on one of the ladies hung up on me yesterday because I was getting too angry. I had enough. I went Bill Burr on her. I just unloaded.
Yeah.
Because the grievance. I'm just trying to file a grievance over this ridiculousness. And every time they call me, all these departments, they call me to say, well, let's go over the story. So you say, and they start reading it 3 sentences in. I'm like, that's not what I told you.
Right.
What are you doing? Who works at these places?
Yeah.
How are you getting a paycheck? Anyway. That's enough of that. Where are we? Oh, let's go back to piss.
Always back to piss.
It's always fun. No, but we do, 2:28, so we got to wrap this up? Or do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah, a few more minutes.
We got about 5, so... what about, the times that I've been in with a psychiatrist, the times that I've gone to therapy and stuff, they always look at me funny when I bring up stuff like Alan Watts, who... basically
like
saying
a pretty not specifically psychedelically oriented character.
No,
Like,
but it's more
part
like
in an American.
like when he talks about the whole thing that he's like he likes he was like many people like him, but they're trying to break it down to make it easier. It was like basically saying back to what we started with, the whole I am the cheese thing. Like you are. It's more to that, to where you are the whole you are everything.
Uh-huh.
We are one goes down all the way to where everybody's actually looking in the mirror. Like I'm not, it's not me. I'm looking at myself when I look at you, or everything I look at, or the same as for you. So, so it's, and it goes back to the whole Jesus thing, and I'm not religious or anything, but the whole non-judgment, because don't judge, because everything you're judging yourself, because everything you're looking at is you, and the whole oneness, and the way I always found it a trip when I bring up stuff like that, and they look at me like steal a Bill Hicks joke, but they'd look at me like a dog that's just been shown a card trick. And you're thinking, wait, you're the ones that should know this. You should really know this, not me. You know what I mean?
Like.
Then again, I said insurance sucks. So what you get, what you have. But
Well, as far as this area of within psychiatry, in this area within psychology, and it's like it's an incredibly niche spot, so it's not surprising to me when, even when I was working more with rooms full of fellow psychiatrists and psychologists, or we'd have meetings or have lectures or things like that. It takes effort to know what's going on in this little world of psychiatry there. And psychology even more so. Psychology there's this clinical psychologist, and that's only one branch of all of psychology, which could be people who their whole thing that they get into that excites them is how memory works, and it's like, so it really depends. It takes effort right now. None of these things are, the MDMA, for example, for PTSD, the psilocybin for end-of-life anxiety, the other sort of exciting studies that are very promising. None of them are at the point where any practicing psychiatrist would have to familiarize themselves even with those medicines, because they're not even able to be used yet. So I would say just cut them some slack. It's probably not so much that they would disapprove if they knew. It's just, of all the things they have to know to be a psychiatrist, this isn't even required.
Right. No, I get that part. Yeah, I feel for them, because I know it's the schooling.
Yeah. So I found,
which is geared
in the majority of situations that I found myself in, most people actually were really open-minded and interested in hearing more when it became apparent that it was something that interested me and that I'd read about. And even people teaching, in a position where they're teaching psychiatry and stuff like that, it's not necessarily something that they would have gotten a lot of expertise in. So they usually just know kind of what most people would know. And on top of that, I think it's important to know that, since the drug war started really in 1970, since Nixon banned all of these drugs, all of the research that has come out has been weighted towards what are the risks. It was much easier to get a study funded if you were examining the damage that these drugs can do. So looking at them as, wait, is there anything good they can do, is a completely new concept.
Yeah.
So any experience that they would have gotten about these would be based on the scientific literature, and all that's in there right now is that marijuana may cause avolitional syndrome, where people lose sort of motivation in a long-term way, especially heavy users, regular users, causes, basically it's been all focused on things that justify the fact that they're illegal.
Yeah, but so they can keep the other garbage going. And well, when it comes to cannabis, I'm big with people complaining about oil. We have one of the answers is industrial hemp. And when we have an oil spill, it won't be that damaging because it's not toxic.
Well, and in this situation with, looking at psychedelics as potentially having some medical benefit, it's like I said, totally novel idea. And the majority of funding comes from the national, or not necessarily national, but governmental level, like grants, research grants. The government doesn't have some room full of like trained scientists on staff. They have like a organization of people who try to look for the best way to, spend the money based on who's got the ideas that the government is interested in finding solutions for. And so the government isn't interested in finding, something that contradicts the DEA's policy. It's just would be bad manners almost. You know, it's like it may not even be that they don't believe. Who knows what they believe on an individual level? At the tops of these organizations that are controlling the research funding, but if they want to maintain their job as head of that organization, I'd imagine it doesn't make for good office politics if you're like going to go give grants that may cause like some serious like problems with contradictions in between different agencies that require meetings and things to resolve.
No, well, you'll be fired for screwing with the pharmaceutical industry if you're pimping psilocybin and these things that, oh, wait, these actually work, so they don't have to keep coming back and taking a pill every day.
Certainly they're not funding them. So I think that as long as there's not the main funders of this kind of research or of psychiatric research in general are the companies that are creating the medicines that are being proposed to be helpful, so that they can make the money back after they spend 30 to 40, $50 million on a phase 3 trial, or the government grants. And so as long as the government doesn't have any, as long as it's still kind of bad manners to fund this kind of research from that perspective, and then none of these things are patentable. So, any executive that proposes doing research on something that they can't make any money back on will be removed from their position as an executive. So we're relying on what MAPS and Hefter Research Institute and the Beckley Foundation, organizations like this, we're relying on, really what we're relying on is the community of people to give donations. This is all donation-funded research. There's nothing like it in history. This is, $30 million is a lot of money. Those studies are not inexpensive to do, and they, this would be, as far as I'm aware, unprecedented to have, the people themselves spreading awareness and donating and raising the funds to do this level of scientific study. So it's a pretty remarkable thing to be a part of.
It's fantastic, and it's great. It's been great to my friend Claire is the first one that told me about MAPS back in I don't know how long ago it was, but it's been nice to like from the outskirts watch, see how much bigger they've gotten, because I've been talking about them for years too. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, that's what I was saying too. But if you look, it's pretty. What is it this year? The phase 3 trials.
That's what it's looking to be. Yeah, the phase 2 review with the FDA was in November, and from everybody that I know at MAPS, heard it went really well. That it sounded like it was a pretty good interaction with the FDA, and the phase 3 proposal has been submitted. So right now we're at a point where as long as things remain on the track that they're on, it should be getting rolling this year. Phase 3.
And you're going to be part of that?
Yeah, hopefully we'll have everything in order and everything we need to have the site for phase 3 in Los Angeles. There's going to be about 10 sites in total. Because what phase 3 what phase 3 means is that you're kind of showing the success you had with phase 2 can be reproduced and sort of scaled and works with larger numbers of people, which requires more places, and also that it kind of works wherever you are doing this, that it's not some isolated incident that someone had success with this one group.
Right.
So the phase 3 idea is to have multiple locations and also see a higher number of people. I think in total it'll be somewhere between 200 and 300 people.
And is it too late for me to sign up? Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Actually, I know the signing up is like a really
that's a hard deal.
Is like a tough situation because so many people obviously are looking for some help, and until we get approved for the study entirely, we have to get approved by something called an IRB. We have to get the FDA approval. Not until it's basically completely past all reviews can we start recruiting people. So I think the best thing to do right now for people interested would be to just sort of follow MAPS. There's ways you can sign up to kind of get updates on things in general from them. So that would be included in those updates.
Yeah, and volunteer people. I've signed up. I'm on the list, but I probably won't be able to do much for a couple of months.
So you get 100%.
100% off this foot.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Marta, this has been great. It's been the first real interview for this podcast, and I've had a blast, and I love everything you're doing. No, it's an honor to sit here, man. And this place is cool. I was reading the plaque outside of this building, the Alameda. Is that how you pronounce it? It's
Yeah, Alameda.
That's where I read my Los Angeles history. I just find these buildings that have plaques outside. They're like, wow, look at this house. Look at this plaque. And this teach you about stuff, or just getting on the subway and just reading the pillars.
Yeah, this is a really beautiful, beautiful campus or beautiful place here. I don't even know what to call it, but it's gorgeous and very blessed to have stumbled across it. Excited.
If somebody, if I get pushed to therapy again, this is the building I want to come to.
All right.
I'll bring my bike.
All right.
Well, thank you, man. Everybody, this has been fun, hasn't it? This was a blast. This it was a lot nicer to have me talking to somebody else, not just listening to my dumb ass. Anyway, it's all part of the cosmic joke, guys. Daddy loves you. Stop looking at me, man.